Hi, my name is Care. I write as C.H. Knight. I write fantasy, usually in alternate worlds. My current published ones are a steampunk fantasy and a world populated by shapeshifters that rings around a world tree. So I dabble in funky worlds. It is a lot funner than having to follow the real rules. My stories tend to be very character driven, and so that is how we experience the worlds as we go. There are other authors who thrive on the world building and like to give us all of the beautiful details they have built into their settings, and there's nothing wrong with that method. That's just not how my brain works. So I experience it with my characters as we travel. So let's see if I have any tips for you today. I will be working off of books that I have written myself, one being the character development workbook, and the others is a writer's world building workbook. Let's start with world building. Don't info dump. You will hear that a lot. Everybody says it. Sprinkle it in. And then the real question is do your readers need to know it? I will be using all of these questions I'm presenting to you to flesh out my next project as we go. Our goal with world building is to make it feel real, to anchor the readers into our setting and let them experience it with us. My preferred way to do this is to anchor them in with sensory details. Sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. If it's a fantasy or sci-fi world, which if we're world building, it probably is there a sixth sense? Are they psychic? Can they see ghosts? My shapeshifters have a sense of magic. There's fae in my steampunk world, and they also have a sense of magic, but is different than my shapeshifters world. So do you have 5 senses, or do you have 6, or even a 7th somehow? All that to say, use your character's senses to anchor your readers into the world. In Skyborn, my steampunk fantasy, there are airships, and the air temperature changed as Inora moved from her first trip up into the aether sphere, where it was cold and wet and icy, and back home on the islands where it was warmer, but the air was still cold and crisp. And then when she reached the ground for the first time, the air was damp and muggy and warm and heavy and earthy compared to the islands above. They live on floating islands filled with aether. In night vision, they are wolf shapeshifters, and they rely on their sense of smell as they move from setting to setting. Let's each pick a setting and see how we can anchor it to our senses to describe it to our readers so they can feel and experience it with us. Is your character native to the setting? Have they witnessed the mountain range before or ever stepped foot in a desert? Have they been in the city or ever left the city? How do they experience that for the first time, or do they find comfort in their surroundings because it is familiar? Every region has its own cultural dialect, even if it's the same species of character. They likely have slightly different traditions and food available. If they live on the seashore, it's going to be fish. If they live in the woods, it's probably venison. On the prairie, some form of cow. Food changes from area to area. What is a common food for the setting where they are? Is there a comfort food that is readily available? What would they find at the street vendor's stall in the market? Have they ever had the spice before? Or do they all eat beans or crickets? Food is a very diverse way to enhance your cultural area. In my Night Vision trilogy, Jothan ends up having to eat fresh mushrooms off the fire, and as a city boy, he somehow had avoided that until then, and that was just a horrible experience for a teenager. So they don't have to like what they get. What is the region's starch? We all have one. Potatoes, noodles, rice, beans. What does the region eat as a carb? Is it fresh baked bread, fried rice, or like mussolini, something with a weird texture that your character has never encountered before? Attack on Titan, they regularly eat whole solid baked potatoes. What is the cheap available starch? Final Fantasy XVI uses visually different military salutes as we progress through each region to indicate the different military styles. Do your characters actually need to know the details? Do they need to know that the city has plumbing, that there's a sewage? Are they getting a pot dumped over their head? Or do they need to slink around in the sewers to escape or get in somewhere? Or is it just background information that doesn't pertain to anybody? You don't have to describe the aqueducts or the hot water or the lack thereof unless the characters are interacting with it. Same with religion. It is good to know that it exists if it does, and have it as a background detail. But if it doesn't directly affect the story or your characters any, do you actually need to describe it? Are there blessings that your characters are receiving? Are they fighting a god? Do they need their faith to defeat the vampire? If not, you probably don't need to detail that directly. It is always good to know these details, as it will be like the cornstarch to your story. It will bulk it up, and the details will sneak in here and there, but you don't have to directly tell us these things. As an exercise, how would your character experience the setting as a native versus as if they were new and inexperienced in the area?
Thank you.
they want and what do they need? They often conflict. A want is often external, something we want, a goal we want to achieve, something we want to own. A need is how we need to change or what we need to sacrifice in order to achieve that goal or to grow and learn and realize that that goal is not actually a true desire. This can come out as someone being loyal to their job and their coworkers, or realizing that they need to leave said job because their coworkers do not pay their bills and management sucks. In night vision, Dante wants to wander around in the woods alone in peace. He needs to find his self-confidence to lead his people as the prince that he is. Dante starts out as very passive in the beginning of night vision and submissive to his council and other people around him, and as he progresses through the trilogy, he learns to stand his ground and not submit to the others around him. He makes his own decisions and holds to them. His aunt learns through the course of the first book to find herself again and remember that there are other people around her, as she lost her husband early on and it broke her. And throughout the first book, she learns to remember who she was without him. In Iron Blood, Ezekiel wants to succeed and win investors at the science fair, and it turns out what he needs is to stand his ground and not allow those investors to buy him out or bully him, as they are not as incorruptible as originally perceived. Go figure. Our characters are full of contradictions, whether it's our wants and our needs, or multiple wants contradicting, or our personality traits. Ezekiel wants to succeed, but he also wants to bring honor to his family. And it turns out that the way to succeed is to dishonor his family, so he has to choose between those two and decide which is more important to him. Enora is too prideful in the beginning to ask for help and suffers on her own through her trials. And then she learns to ask for help and allow the people around her to support her. Enora will forcefully face down the admirals in the council chambers, but she is utterly terrified of what her fiancé will think of her new circumstances when he finds out. What two traits can your characters have that clash from time to time? Are they focused most of the time but easily distracted by something? Do they hyper-focus, or do they ADHD focus where they ping-pong around from project to project? Are they clumsy but dedicated? They refuse to give up? Are they passive until something happening to somebody else activates their need to protect people, and then they are stubborn and will stand in front of them to protect them? Are they generous unless it comes to food? Are they always late but are judgmental when somebody else is? People are full of contradictions, all of us, all the time. So should our characters be, to give them a sense of depth. If they only have one trait that never changes or clashes with another within them or somebody else's, then you are going to have a shallow, one-dimensional set of words on a page. Another way to add depth to our character is to give them likes and dislikes, things they can't stand, things they love, silly little quirks. What's something that's always in their pocket or their purse or their car? Do they have a favorite gun? Have they named it? Do they carry a locket around their neck? What's in it? Child's lock of hair, their beloved's picture. Another quirk they can have is how do they show their nerves or anger. When they're nervous, Enora chews on the inside of her cheek. Nakai tends to twist the bottom of her shirt and her fingers. Dante refuses to show his nerves and therefore gets tension headaches on a regular basis throughout the trilogy. A form of change for Dante as we progress also is in the beginning he grinds his teeth and doesn't say anything to reveal his feelings in a circumstance. He holds it back, whereas at the end he will growl and display his anger and refuse to back down to his council members again. Another thing I spend a lot of time doing for my characters as I go through their stories is to track their injuries and have consequences. They are rarely ever 100% again, at least for some time. Dante enters the story with burn scars that have set back his self-confidence. They are part of why he doesn't feel adequate as a prince. There is a prequel tale to that. Alexion gets injured and ends up with a back brace for the rest of the trilogy. And well, for the rest of his life, it does not heal entirely. Spoiler alert, Enora loses her leg in the beginning and has to learn to adapt to the amputation and learn that she is not her limb, that she can continue on as a whole person without the extra set of toes. There's minor injuries that can be tracked, but often still scar. At the very least, bruises should turn yellow in the next chapter, depending on how time is progressing, obviously. Track the injuries. Don't just beat them up and then not have a black eye the next day. Let's see if we can take a character and make their needs clash with their wants. Let's find out how they need to change, what they need to sacrifice or accept of themselves to achieve the end goal, even if it's not the same goal as how they started.